John, how you doing?
Doing great, Ryan. How are you?
I'm doing good. I am pumped for this episode because you and I had a lot of stuff in common as what it was like selling family businesses, working in them, and then working for the new employer, and just all the trials and tribulations that you put yourself through, and the torture that you self-select for in a family business.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of parallels in our paths.
So let's go back. And you and I were even rallying when we first met about how did you become an entrepreneur? What was where did you get hooked on business, and what was the kind of the origination story of the family business?
Yeah, so the origin is, my father and his father started the business together back in 1978. And they got into the business because my grandfather was a tile contractor. So he used to do work all around New York City, Queens. And eventually he started his own tile store right on Northern Boulevard in Queens, like the main thoroughfare. Did that for a while. And that was, my father like grew up in that business. I think when he was younger, maybe 13, 14, he was working with my grandfather selling tile, and at the same time they still had a contracting leg of their business. So they did that for quite a while. I'm not sure how long, maybe 10, 15 years. And I know my father, when he became maybe 25, 26, he just kind of got tired of that lifestyle because contracting work, it is obviously very laborious and puts some wear and tear on the knees, and it's hard work, even though it's a great business. So they were trying to figure out, well, what can we do that's different? And I guess they came to realize like they had such great connections and already knew so many contractors in the area. They came up with the idea to start making the setting materials. So they bought a little shop that's actually right across from where City Field is, where the Mets play back in
Okay.
78. And they started making epoxies for because that was the setting material of choice at the time.
Hmm.
And from there, they actually right out of the bat did very well due to all the connections they had. And from there, it grew into the big business we had when before we exited back in November of
When
2017.
did you start getting involved in the business?
Oh man, even in high school, I was
Right.
very involved. I was always coming in and just because I was always transient. So my father would like be picking me up from wherever. He'd bring me back to the office so he could finish working for the day, and I would help out, do whatever. So even in high school, I was helping with just the normal office tasks like filing and doing some computer work maybe. But I really got started getting involved in college. Basically every summer I worked at the business. And I think the first jobs I really did was customer service. I helped up there with like the logistics and the scheduling of the trucks and taking orders, entering them into the
Just the
system.
best part of everything, right?
Yeah, exactly. So really just the front end. Yeah, I'd
How big
say
was the business then, John?
when back in my college days,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I think we topped out at around 45 employees, and our best year we did 13 million in revenue.
It's a good sized business. So did you like when you're what were you going to college for? And then did you intend to join the business, or was it just kind of happenstance?
Yeah, it was happenstance. I went to college originally for to learn engineering. I mean, I got into Virginia Tech, which is a great engineering school, but I learned that engineers work too hard and I couldn't party as much, so I gave that up for business.
Oh, the
Yeah,
business degree, that is the
that's
catch-all for someone that likes to be social and do some work.
yeah, exactly. So I did business, and then at that time I graduated in 2006 in May, and I worked in insurance for a year, which I really did not enjoy at all. And that was down in DC. I moved back to New York after that because I wasn't sure what I was going to do. So I started looking for a job once I moved back. And, in the interim, I was just working at the family biz because I needed something to do. And that's actually the time when like the recession started hitting, and it was just impossible to find a job at that time. And unfortunately, I didn't really take my life and my career too serious when I was 22. I mean, I never did any internships or whatnot, and I think all that detracted from my ability to get a good job. So I just kept working at the family business, and no job came along. The recession hit, and then it just at that time I was full on in the business, and I said, let's just continue this, and my father agreed, and that's how it kind of worked out.
So what was the what any other family members? I can't remember exactly because there was you, your dad. And what other family members? What was the ownership structure like, and what was the inner workings and the dynamics?
Yeah, so my when my father and his father started the business, they were 50-50. And then when my grandfather passed in 91, he left half of his shares to my dad and half of the other half to his daughter, my aunt. So when I was in the business, yeah, my dad owned 75%, my aunt owned 25%. My aunt was entirely in charge of the sales and marketing. My father really, looked over all the manufacturing, all the product development, the operations. And, family dynamics wise were interesting. It was,
What were
you
some
know,
of the biggest
I,
challenges?
yeah, it was for me, I always wanted to just work on growing the business. And I think that's where I kind of got in a lot of, stalemates with my father is that the business, the whole time I was there from 2007 to 2018, I mean, we didn't grow at all. No new revenue. It was like we just basically flatlined for 10 years straight. The first few years I was getting comfortable in the business and learning it, so I wasn't really pushing it. But by about year 4 or 5, I was like, hey, it's time to switch things up here, obviously, right? We're not growing. Something's got to change. And to me, it was very hard to work on the sales and marketing end because my aunt and my father's relationship was very strained, especially in the business. I don't know, they didn't work well together. That's for sure, in my opinion. My father was very, he was, I don't want to say like a dictator, but it was like, when he wanted something, it was just he would demand it and that would be it. And you couldn't really ever get him to change his opinion. And I think for my aunt, like that was very tough for her because she wanted to do things with the sales and marketing. And if like he didn't agree, he would just flat out tell her no. And so I think, her feelings were always like being touched. It was very, in that respect, it was always emotional for her and for him. And I think a lot of that contributed to like the us not really growing because she had complete control of over sales and marketing. Like she did what she wanted to do, and he had complete control over operations. And there was just always like this divided line between the two, right? Sales and marketing was always saying, "Oh, these operation people are messing up," and then all the operations people are saying, "Oh, well, these sales and marketing people aren't doing shit." So it's just, it's kind of like I refer to it as like the wheel of death. We were just like spinning there, going nowhere with the same bullshit, just flying
How
through
would
it
you
all
deal
day
with it?
long.
Like, what was what were the conversations like with the people and I mean, was it like a clear divide that people were just kind of almost taking sides and like where were you stuck in it and like how did like where was your head at?
Yeah, honestly, my head at certain times, I just like almost wanted to give up, and I mean, I practically did give up. We had a few key operational people, maybe 3 or 4, and then the rest were really just factory workers. And then sales, we had my aunt, and then she had 3 or 4 sales guys at all times. So it was really the top people in when we had like our executive meetings, it would be me, the COO, my father, my aunt, and like the guy who was kind of in charge of the factory operations. So those meetings, oh my God, they were terrible.
Mm.
I would come in and most of the time I would daze out because my aunt would always fight with the COO. Like they would just, it was like a chicken fight, dude. They were going back and forth, squawking at each other, and it was all about like trying to, I guess, be like impressive to my father. who would just eventually sit there and then like, snap and be like, shut up and let's go to the next point. But very, our culture was really, it just wasn't the right culture. At least I didn't appreciate it because a lot of just infighting and too much of people pointing the finger, blaming each other for what's not going right in the company.
What was the conversations that you and your dad were having? Like, what I mean, did you like? Was there any intentions of you buying it? Were there conversations about like what the company's worth or how to buy out your aunt? I mean, was it just like this future hope that that conversation would happen?
We had those conversations. I mean, I didn't even want to necessarily buy out my aunt. My whole stance with her was like, she's not the right person to be managing our sales team. That was always my quip, and he would agree with that. But the actually acting upon that was too emotional for him, and he could never pull that trigger. The whole intent, the my father only wanted me to take over the business, and I did for a long time. I really did, but I felt like, if he couldn't get over this one issue of like, figuring out something to do with her that wasn't running the sales, like how am I ever going to be able to take this company and change it?
Hmm. Well,
Um,
so were you actually running the bit? Like, were you getting to the point where you were running a lot of the business then, or was it just like conversations of like you mentally were like I could do this, but then the hurdles were too big.
yeah, mentally I was there and I was running the business. I mean, by the time we sold, I was involved in every area. I
Hmm.
was doing sales, I was running the marketing, I built the new websites we had. I was still in operations, and I grew up in the factory. I mean, I learned how to make all the products. I learned the chemistry. I built our quality control systems. I learned how to run all the machinery. I did everything except drive the delivery trucks. I never got a commercial license. Uh, so I certainly had the skills, but it's that emotions of telling family members like, hey, you're not the right person for this job. It just we could never get past that. And my father would admit to me like, yeah, your aunt is probably not the right person to run in sales. So my reply was like, okay, so what do we do about this? She's family. We're obviously not going to kick her to the curb, but this ain't working. So what do we do? But that was where it ended with that conversation. It was just way too emotional. He couldn't get past the emotion of changing her role, and sticking to it.
So then, in that sequence of time, like when you're probably dealing with some fatigue at that point, going, okay, what in the hell's the situation and the solution for this? Did you guys talk to consultants, family business consultants, or was there anybody that you were reaching out to, or and what was the whole triggering event to entertaining an offer?
So, well, the whole offer came down to me eventually going to my father and saying, I'm sick of this shit. You don't want to change anything in the business. And, for me, I felt like part of the reason he wanted me to take it over was so that like he could still like kind of be in the business, which, I get and appreciate, but like you can't empower somebody to take over a business and then, make them, kind of keep their arms handcuffed. That's what I felt like. He
Hmm.
wanted to empower me while keeping me handcuffed, you
Quote
know?
unquote empowered, right?
Right, exactly, and that's not empowering. And I think he did that even as well to my aunt. Like at times he tried to empower her, but at the same time he's giving her the direction or authoritative direction. And so eventually, yeah, I just felt like
How
there was no out. I felt like there was nowhere to go, and so I went to him in I think August 2015, and I was just like, you know what? If you can't change the things that you know that need to be changed in this business, then I don't want to be part of it.
what was his reaction? And how did you how did you feel going into that conversation?
Oh, it was like the toughest conversation of my life at the time. And I think he was very hurt by it because, I think for him, he built this whole thing so one day I could take it over and continue, running it. And so the entire family could continue benefiting from it because it was a great business and it did make great money. But it just, that wasn't me. And honestly, it wasn't even about control for me. Like I didn't need to be in charge of the business and making all the decisions. Like, I just wanted to have a team that was out there kicking ass, taking no prisoners, and growing the thing, and putting us on the right track to continually grow. Because there was certainly opportunity to do it, but we needed a lot of change, and that's where that was like the sticking point to me.
Was there, in your dad's or your aunt's like not wanting to change, was there any challenges that you guys had about like them not wanting to reinvest in the business, or was it more just like challenges on the vision?
Well, we didn't even have a vision. That's number one. And reinvesting, yeah, that was another point because, I think we all realized, we were doing a lot of manual processes at the company that, if you look at it now, the company that took over, they've automated the business and dropped like, they've already dropped about 30% of the labor force we had. So we were always looking at doing those investments. We needed that because we were making commodities. So we always had to find ways to cut down the cost. And that was the next step. But, my father never wanted to go there because he never felt like he could get the return because we weren't driving the sales. The investments we needed in our business were, at least from a factory and automation perspective, were probably close to $2 million to do it the right way. So the payback on that, he didn't see the payback ever.
In his span of his timeline, right?
Yeah, exactly. And or with the way the sales was going and us just flatlining
Hmm.
year after year.
Like you said, circle of death, right?
Yeah.
So what was the what was the and actually before like you went down the process of actually explaining it. So you had this conversation with your dad. Was there anything like, hey, I don't know if you guys had heard of the book Traction or EOS at that point, or like reached out to family business consultants? 'Cause I remember I tried everything, and so like
Yeah.
and my dad and I like that we ours was more on the tactical stuff of which is why I've got the business now about how to like grow and sell, but it was more tactical, less. I mean, trust me, there was plenty of emotions and tons of yelling in management meetings, but then that kind of worked itself over time. But was there any family business consultants that you brought in, or any of these other resources that you had wanted to go down the route of before deciding to sell?
Yeah, I tried to bring in EOS twice.
Oh,
We
did
met
you?
with two different guys who were certified. Both guys my father liked and I liked, and I think even my aunt liked. And we were all in agreement we should do this, but my father wouldn't pull the trigger. I think, too, I brought a guy in, I think, very close to that. I think I brought a guy in right after I told him I didn't want to stay. And then what happened was he wouldn't commit at that time because we had already found the buyer and the negotiations had already begun. And so he's like, I don't see the point in
Got it. Well, let's
spending
let's
the
walk
money
us
on
walk us
this.
through that, John. What was that process like? Did you guys hire an investment banker? Did you guys start making phone calls? What was the kind of the setup for that?
It was actually kind of lucky. After I had that conversation with my father, his first move was like, all right, if this is your decision, let me hire an investment banker so I can figure out what my options are and the best way to proceed. So he hired a guy out of New York, and then
How did you pick them?
I'm not sure. My father was introduced to him through a mutual
Okay.
friend, so that's how we found him. And then, oddly enough, the buyer who called us out of the blue because we had a mutual customer out of Brooklyn. And I guess, this company that bought us, they were going on an M&A tear, just trying to find, anybody they can to increase their market share. And we had a very strategic position being inside of New York City. Not a single competitors of ours was inside of New York City, and nowadays to go invest and try to build a factory in New York City, it's not
Insane.
worth it for anybody. Yeah. So I guess through their my client and the buyer, through their mutual conversations, they were talking about it, and our customer said, "Oh, well, you should talk to the Garuttis because they've got a great business." And the buyer, did the same exact things. We're making the same exact products we were. So he literally called in like it was literally like one week I told my father I don't want to do this. Next week he had an investment banker, and then the week after these people called out of the blue to be like, "Hey, what's going on? Would you be open to talking?" So yeah, all that kind of, that had to be fate just coming around. Very lucky that it all happened so fast.
Walk us through the process then, John. So were you guys pissed that you had hired the banker because of the commissions, or like what was I mean, did you get other buyers involved, and what was your expectation and your role in that whole process?
Yeah, so we weren't pissed we hired the banker because I think, we didn't know, obviously, just that one person calling out of the blue, we didn't know if that would work out. And,
Hmm.
we realized if we were going to do this, we had to be serious and go out and find multiple buyers.
Hmm.
So we weren't concerned about that. But at that time, we got into conversations right away with that initial buyer. So at first, it seemed like we were going to do a deal in like 2 months. And we would be part of this new company. It'll all look kosher. But then once we got into the due diligence, obviously the disagreements came there on the asking price. I mean, they wanted us from the get go. They were clear about that. They had already showed that hand, but then it was coming to terms, and I guess our EBITDA wasn't where they wanted it to be to meet the price my father was looking for the business. So that happened all super fast. Like it was like we were going to sell in 2 months, and then I remember it being like January, February, and it's like, okay, the deal's off, and I'm like, shit.
So walk us through that because a lot of the listeners and especially as we get to like what you're doing now too, but like due diligence cannot be underestimated. Oh, because
Yeah,
it just it like literally is a full colonoscopy. I mean, it is like something that people explain what that process was like, and then and I mean, even before you go into that, John, like how did your dad come up with the value of the company that he wanted? And then how did that change as due diligence happened? And what were the red flags happening?
yeah. I'm not sure how he came up with the number. I mean, I think he knew what he wanted, and I'm sure he spoke with the investment banker to get
Hmm.
a feel. I mean, we knew that buyer, we should be able to get a premium for multiple reasons. Not just that we did everything they do, but we were a perfect strategic fit. But that location we have in New York and that distribution in New York City, I mean, you couldn't really put a price tag on that. So,
So
and
then
what was the other question
I was
now?
gonna say then in the due diligence, because I think
Yeah,
so many times people like, okay, we got this, and I don't know, like we got this letter of intent. Okay, we want to go down this route, and then due diligence starts. So explain what that process was like. What was your involvement in that? And then honestly, I'm just curious, man, like what did you like where was your head at? Because when I was going through it, my dad and I had to have some very hard conversations about because I technically I had no equity, but like I was running the business. And so like we had to like sit down and work out how I was gonna get paid. And so we ended up working that out, but it was a lot of hard conversations because it was, I was bringing significant value to everything. And in a normal circumstance, I would have had equity, had we gone down done all the right things. But like,
yeah.
so how did you guys do it? Or was it something where like you were so ready to be done that it was just like, I'll just get this done and then I'll just go work somewhere else? Like so and how did that impact your head as you were going through the due diligence process?
Yeah, I mean, as we were going through it, I mean, I was just, looking for the next opportunity. That's really all I was concerned about. I mean, I would come during the day, and the due diligence was like so deep, man. I just remember, pulling out report after report after report, financial reports, inventory reports, customer reports. And the crazy thing was, I felt like I had to redo the reports time after time, like in different ways for different people in their company. It was a lot of work for sure. And at the same time, we were very cautious about what we showed them. So, like, they wanted to see like a top 10 customer report. So we gave it to them, but we left out the customer name because we were like, we don't want to show you who these people are.
Yeah, especially because you compete
They're,
with them, right?
yeah, exactly. And at the time, we were competing with you guys. So,
We did the
uh,
same thing, John, like, and it's
yeah.
so crazy because like, there talk about a fine dance that, for the listeners, like, when you're selling to a strategic competitor, I mean, like, even though they might be great people, there's just the nature of all of a sudden now they have your customer list. And like I swear to God, man, like there was like people that started popping up onto our accounts while we were going through the process.
Yeah, that happened to us too. So the big thing was, so we had two main product lines. We had the tile setting, and then we had the stucco. So our buyer was big in the stucco in the New York City area, but they had no presence whatsoever in the tile setting. And I remember in those early stages of due diligence, they wanted to go out and, they went out with the sales team, met a few customers, and then, yeah, sure enough, next thing we know, one of our customers is buying from them. We were like, really? Are you, is this a joke? But that does happen, and you certainly got to be wary of it if you are going to sell to like a competitor or
What were some of the
somebody.
things that happened in the due diligence that caught you by surprise that impacted their terms and conditions and price?
It just, the negotiation was arduous. It just was back and forth, back and forth. The person who was responsible for the M&A on that side, he was, just to give you a little more context, the company bought us as a global company. They do business in 25 countries and over $1 billion in sales worldwide. So this guy's in charge of North and South America, right? He's like literally one step removed from the worldwide CEO. So this guy was like such a tough negotiator. But at the same time, I don't think he realized how tough my father was. They would have these back and forth on just like every single point had to be like argued out and revisited multiple times. Because my father, God bless him on this end, he did not give an inch. I think these people, they just thought they've got this air about them that they think they're just like, I don't even know how to describe it. Very big egos, right? And
I'm just picturing your dad, some guy, first generation entrepreneur from Queens, man. I just like
yeah, and yeah, it was crazy just the back and forth. And I think what just threw me off, and not that even threw me off, it was just so draining, was one week it looks like it's going through, and then, my father and this guy would get in like a tat, and then, the deal would be off for like another month. And then, yeah, it was just back and forth for
how long did that go on for? You said that the deal was pulled off, and then what brought it back on? What was the total time cycle?
the whole time. It took 2 years, and the whole 2 years we
Holy shit.
were we were talking back and forth, back and forth. That initial, I'd say maybe around September of 2017, or 2015, we had those initial talks.
Jeez,
By
man.
February or March, my father actually made an announcement to the whole company that the deal's off for now. Doesn't mean it can't come back, because a lot of people at this time now were getting frantic. The employees were concerned because they didn't know what was going to happen to them.
Why did you guys tell them to begin with?
Nobody told them, but then they found out, and
Yep.
some other stupid things happened. Like, they came and visited the plant, and my father, was dishonest about who was coming to visit the plant. But he told the guys in the factory to shape up, make sure everything's clean and whatnot.
Oh, there you go.
So, yeah, so they come and visit, and sure enough, the chemist we hired knew the operations guy
Oh
from
my
the
god,
buyer.
totally
So,
seen that. Yeah,
so
yeah.
then he tells everybody on the factory floor, and like all the managers down there are now freaking out. And you know, then of course we're a small company, so now everybody, all 30, 40 people know, and they're talking about this, and are, obviously it's certainly fair for them to be concerned about what's going to happen next. But then, they were not trusting my father because he just like, he,
How did
he
you guys
didn't want
do?
anybody to know, which I totally understand and get.
Mm.
But then he compounded the issue by lying to these, like, these top managers in the company about the situation. So that didn't go well.
How did like where what role did you play in that? Were you the cleanup guy for the drama, or what was your role?
Yeah, I just, I kind of tried to stay out of it. I just was doing what I needed to do because we needed to keep running the company regardless. So I was just, focused on doing my work. And When I was needed to do stuff with the diligence, I would get involved.
It's tough, man. Like it's tough to like even be passionate when you got a 2-year roller coaster like that. I mean, we went on and off for a couple years. I mean, but it was in short spurts. It wasn't like the long, drawn out thing. But it's just, and I think this is for any of the listeners, man. Like when you have your key executives that they're not tied into like the final outcome. I mean, it's an emotional, mental like nuclear war in your head.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it was just the how emotional it was like the toughest part to deal with because I just wanted it to be over. I wanted to be done. I wanted to be out of that company and on to doing my own thing. And there it was just dragging on and dragging on. And
So explain the closing, and like as you if you finally get to this closing, like what was the like explain how that was closed? What was your role going to be into it? I mean, like did they have some sort of like clause that they wanted you and the key executives? I mean, like what was the next phase and the closing phase, the closing phase and the next phase like?
yeah, so well, one of the things that was argued up to the last point was, keeping the executives there. My father did not want to stay. He made that very clear that like once the check is signed and the deal's executed, I'm out of here. I'm not staying. I'm not helping you transition. I'm not doing any sort of consulting for you guys. I'm done. So then, they obviously going through this, they knew some people had to stay on. So it wound up being me and the COO, and actually everybody in the company stayed on at first. Really, my father was the only one who left. So, but my father negotiated a contract for me and my aunt and the COO, a year contract, because he didn't want us to like have nothing out of nowhere or get kind of get screwed like these people obviously could have come in and done whatever they wanted at that time. But that was a big negotiating point because they didn't like that for some reason. They fought about those contracts for a long time. That probably was 3 or 4 months of the actual negotiation.
Was them not wanting one or all of you guys, or was it
Yeah, I
both?
think it was honestly we were like top heavy.
Hmm.
Going back to some of the things I would have changed, we definitely had too many managers, and we had too many people who just had no value in the company, at least in my eyes. So I think they kind of recognized that coming in. They're like, "Well, why do you have we had a plant manager, a director of operations, a COO. Like I had like a weird title that was operations. I don't even remember. I think I was like vice president of operations. So okay, you got like five operations manager in a company with like 35 people. I'm sure they were like, this makes no sense whatsoever. And of course, they also had a way they liked to structure each business because really, when we got rolled into them, now we were just a plant in their network.
Explain what that was like. I mean, so what was integration like? How was it like, what was the what was the strategy and what was it like working for them?
Yeah, so I remember I think we signed the papers on the Thursday. That Friday, they all came in. We met with the entire company, and my father just made the announcement, said goodbye, literally got in the car and drove down to Florida.
Oh my gosh.
And then I had to, that weekend, we had to do inventory to reconcile the deal. And from that point on, their director of operations was there, mainly working with me. And then, the sales guys were working with my aunt and even the COO, he was kind of doing a lot. He was like reporting to the CEO. But at that point on, they wanted me to be the plant manager and help transition our company into just like really being an operational plant in their network. So it was a lot of hard work at first, man, because so this happened in November. The first thing to do was move to their ERP system. So this was and they wanted this done by January 1st.
Oh my
So
gosh.
I'm sure you know how crazy ERP
Yeah,
implementation
done a
can
couple of
be.
them myself.
So we had to take our whole system and transplanted into theirs in 2 months. It was insane.
Yeah,
We
right.
were working, I was working like, 12-hour days those first few weeks, just because there was so much to prepare, while at the same time trying to get people up to snuff on their systems, while trying to reorganized to how they like to run the plants. It was a lot of work, and it was interesting at first because it was, for me, I had never really worked in any company outside of the family business. So, I did enjoy that part, and we made a lot of progress. We actually got that implementation done on January 1st,
Oh my
and
gosh.
we were there. I remember like that first week in January, man, I was there like, again, like 14 hours a day because we had to make sure everything was running, processing correctly, double checking everything, and we were always running the factory at that time about 10 to 12 hours a day. So that was a lot.
So what was the culture like? I mean, did they didn't do any major layoffs, and was there fallout and resentment happening to you?
Yeah, I mean, everybody in the company blamed me for, the business being sold, but I think honestly, like, I looked at the factory workers. I don't think they really cared because at the end of the day, they just wanted their jobs, which they got to retain. There's more of the upper managers, some of the people who've been with my father, for a long time, like 20, 30 years. But I think because they realized like they were probably the most likely targets to get removed, and that's actually what happened. They weren't wrong, and
How long
I
did
think at the same time, though, a lot of those people were super comfortable where they are working with my father. And but those were like the people I wanted to get rid of because I didn't see the value they were bringing to the company, right?
Yep. So did at any point in that time, John, did you have any regrets of not wanting to take it over?
To be honest, no. You know, I felt bad for a lot of people because eventually we did wind up laying off some of the workforce as we introduced the automation, and it was tough for some of the people who had worked there for. I had to lay off a guy who worked for my grandfather and my father for like 35 years, so that one sucked. That guy probably hates my guts now, and I'm sure he'll never talk to me ever again. And I felt bad for some of the factory workers too, because honestly, most of our factory workers were like migrants, living here on visas, and just having those factory jobs was so meaningful for them because a lot of them were from like the Dominican Republic, and they were able to work here, make money, live, and still send money back to their families.
Mhm.
Um, and honestly, we had pretty good loyalty with our employees. I mean, everybody, I'd say 90% of the company had, at that time had been working with us for at least like 15, 20 years.
Jeez. Wow.
Yeah.
Like, it's tough.
Yeah. It's not fun. That's
No,
for sure.
and that I mean, I got a stomach ache even thinking about it because I had to go through the same thing. And what where was your head at? Like, how long did you stay with them, and what was the new culture, man? Like, what was it like being, an employee for someone else?
Yeah. Well, I stayed with them for the year because that was what my contracts was for. And, I wanted to obligate that because I still have to have a relationship with the company. Culture-wise, it was hard to get a feel for it at first because they had a core team of people who was at the plant. I mean, literally the first 12 weeks, there was people from the headquarters there working with us every day to get us transitioned. So, working with some of those people was nice because they were like the top people in the company, and most of them were pretty sharp. But as time went on and as things normalized, that's when I got a feel for the culture. And it was, I felt like the culture at their company was like worse than the culture my own family had.
Yeah,
Um,
in what way?
very, it was just very unorganized. People, what drove me nuts were there were all these people in high level positions who were just lazy and like didn't get the job done. I mean, I was working my ass off every day for these people because I wanted to, and then, as plant manager, now my role was to be like a liaison between the plant and the headquarters in California. So I had to work with every damn director of every different department. Director of HR, director of operations, director of R&D, director of the various sales departments. The CEO would send me stuff to do as well, and just you know these people these directors like had to coordinate all their work across 8 plants in the U.S.
Jeez.
While I also had to coordinate now with plants on the East Coast because I was bringing up raw materials from some of these other plants, or I was bringing up finished goods now. Working with the plant managers was actually pretty easy. But then when you get these like directors involved, it's just like the communication just like broke down. And I saw a lot of people just siloing information, poor planning, poor executing. And then it's like, it felt like everything they threw it back at the plant managers, like, why did this go wrong? And then it's like the directors are just sitting up on the podium saying, oh, yeah, they fucked up, not me.
Mhm.
It's hard to gauge what's going on because I never even went to the headquarter office in California, so I don't know what's going on there. But you hear stories from people, right? So overall, I think they just, the culture just was not high performing. It was not dynamic, and then we had this influence of being a global company based out of France. We had all this influence from like the main guys in France. So, they would come down to the plant in New York and just see things and say, I want this, this, and this fixed. And then the directors of the US would be like, they would just, appease them and say, yeah, we take care of it. And then, once they leave, be like, they tell me, don't do that.
Oh
Don't listen to
my
that
god.
guy. I'm like, well, all right, well, I'm just going to listen to my direct bosses. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that was going on left and right. And it's just like, how can this company go anywhere or grow? I mean, their whole strategy was like M&A, which is, of course, a great strategy if you've got the cash. But then, where's the organic growth? I didn't see them growing that way just because of all this, the poor culture they have.
Well, and it's funny. There's actually a couple interviews that I've done where when they say that the integration isn't done correctly, like kind of what you're just describing, is most people that acquire companies don't get the return on the investment that's above and beyond their cost of capital because they have no idea how to integrate the company
Yeah.
into the actual big machine. What was your dad doing? Like what was your conversations with him like afterwards, and a little bit of context. I remember when I quit the company because I lasted like I think a little over 60 days at the acquirer, and he's like, I'm just so happy I don't have to talk about our industry anymore.
Yeah.
Because like he didn't even want to talk, even though he loves me and like we're friends, and he's like, I just don't want to talk about it anymore. What was the dialogue going on with you two, and like was it cordial? I mean, you guys like what was the whole relationship?
Yeah, no, it was cordial. I mean, I would tell him what was going on, and he was interested. And of course, he had a vested interest because that plant we still own it as a family. So, he was just checking up on me to make sure nothing was getting damaged. But I would tell him stuff that was driving me nuts, and he'd say, "Listen, just hang in there. You got the contract. Fulfill the contract. Let's keep our relationship positive with these people. And, when it's done, do what you want to do."
So,
So,
so you guys kept the building then? Is that what?
yeah, we still own the building that they're operating out of. So,
So then I'm curious, in if you don't know, it's not a big deal. I'm just curious, like as you guys are going through that due diligence, John, and then like the different things are coming up, do you know like the deal structure? You don't have to give any terms or actually any pricing, but
yeah.
was it cash? Was there earnouts or promissory notes or anything tied to it?
Yeah, so there was just, I think we got something like 80% of the cash up front. And then there was a 5% payout at 12 months, another 5% at 18 months, and then I think at 24 months, there's the remaining balance will be paid out.
And
So, but yeah, in terms of like guarantees, though, the amount of guarantees that were written in this contract were like silly. They had guarantees over every little single thing, and this was another thing we argued because they just, for them, they didn't want to. Obviously, right when you buy any business, is about the transferability. And I think they had some previous M&As that just went like really bad for them. So they probably learned from those hiccups. But for the most part, everything got fulfilled. I mean, we didn't lose. They've got no right to come at us for anything. So
can you explain the transferabilities, or I'm sorry, the guarantees that you were talking about, and like, do you know if it was a stock or an asset sale?
We actually had to do a combination sale just for tax purposes, and this was again another thing that was argued because I think I don't remember which was more beneficial for them. I think it's the
The asset sale is usually what's more beneficial for cash.
yeah. So they wanted more of an asset sale, and I think we wanted more of a stock sale. So we had to like come to terms on like what was stock and what was asset. That was another thing that tied up the negotiation.
And for the listeners and also for as you're doing deals too, it's like the buyer wants the stock or wants the asset purchase because they can depreciate it and all the liabilities stay with the seller, but then it's ordinary income for the seller versus capital gains if it's a stock. So there's like immediate tensions that people have off the get-go in the
Yeah,
negotiations.
right.
So, what was that like? How did you get to the point where you're like, was it like 12 months in one day, or like what was your game plan as you were going forward?
I just honestly after about 6 months, I was like, all right, I'm not sticking on for this any longer. I knew at like 12 months I was going to resign, and I part of my salary, I had like a 20% bonus if I stayed the entire year. So I was like, okay, literally like the day they paid me the bonus, I that was the day I put in my 2 week notice. But actually,
Mhm.
I had it all planned. But sorry, actually, what did happen though was they actually really liked me and wanted me to stay in the company and continue working and maybe move up to like where I became a regional manager and had a few plants under me. And so I remember just being in this meeting with the CEO and the director of operations of the USA, and it was like about 6 weeks out from the end of my contract, and they were talking about all these great big plans they had for me and what they wanted me to be focused on, yada yada yada. And I'm just like there in that meeting thinking like, well, I'm not even going to be doing any of this, and it made me feel terrible. So right after that meeting was over, I remember the CEO went down to the hall to an office, and I just followed him right in there, and I said, "Yeah, I'm not staying." I don't want you to be making all these plans and thinking I'm going to be the guy to do all those things because I'm not. I'd rather tell you now, and so you guys can start preparing. But when my contract's up, I'm out of here. And he was actually, they were upset because they did want me to continue, but he was appreciative that I approached him and told him because he said, especially for plant managers, that's an important position for them. He said the more time you give us, the better, because it can be very challenging in that role, or really any role, if you just drop off and leave, right?
Mhm.
That's how it went
You
down.
have
The
the perspective
director of
on that.
operations, yeah, I mean, the director of operations was upset because I think he had mentored me a bit, and he was a very good guy. I enjoyed working with him a lot, but I think I kind of put a gap in his plan as well that he now had to figure out how to fill. So.
So, John, if you like look back at your whole journey working in the family business and the actual exit and sale, is there like for the listeners, like, is there anything that you'd say, like, this is what I would have done differently, or here's, now going through it, eyes wide open, here's what I would look out for, or, expect, or, something to be cautious of?
Well, if I look back at it, I feel like the only thing I could have maybe done better was, maybe before wanting to leave the company, like, pushing my father, my dad harder on, what I think needed to change and trying to get that and executing on that. I mean, I really felt like we could have had a $50 million business, and we were like right there. It's like I always felt we were right on the line, right? We just like couldn't lift up our foot to cross it. And for me, that's kind of like really the only regret. I think we could have had this crazy large company that could have sold for even more money than what we got. But you know, looking back at it, and now that I'm in my new career, I'm so much more into sales and trying to get people to or convince people to take actions and whatnot. It's I feel like I could have done that way better. So I guess for anybody, all your listeners, especially people who are in family business situations, I mean, I think you need to be very clear about what you want and communicating that to, the rest of your family, and determining if it's doable. Because you know what, I think my situation's not uncommon. I think it's it,
Uh,
and it's hard for me to, I didn't realize my situation was not uncommon until I like went to school and actually, my MBA was in small and family business management, right? So I read about all this, it's like reading my own biography over and over.
is it
Yeah,
therapeutic or do you get pissed at your situation? Because like I same thing. That's why I've been doing this for the last 5 years. Like, what the heck happened, man?
yeah, no, it is therapeutic because I think a lot of people feel like they're trapped and like they got such a unique situation, and when reality it's not. I actually, I think I read something like 30% of, family businesses, they wound up, the kids don't want to take it over for whatever reason. Or maybe it's only 30% of family businesses get taken over by the next generation.
So I think it's like 30% transition to the next generation, and then it's
Yeah.
like 8% and 2%. I don't remember what it is, but it's like it's crazy small. And I do believe you're right, John. I mean, it's like it's there's this whole big argument or like, really big confusion, ambiguity around, okay, there's W-2 salaries, then there's ownership, and those are different, right? And then there's the family estate versus sweat equity. And like, there's all this stuff that can be cleared up, but you have to have hard conversations, right? I mean, so many family businesses, whether it's your aunt or, other people, they just like kind of slot them in over to the corner to make people feel good instead of addressing the family needs, or the family business's needs. And actually,
Yeah.
there's a really good book for the listeners. I interviewed him to circle back, or even for you, John. It's called "Every Family's Business." I think it's by
Mhm.
Tom Deans, and he literally just said every single family business should sell. So like the kids should either buy it at fair market value, and there's a lot of reasonings behind that because there's a lot of reasons you shouldn't do that too for tax planning. But anyways, it's just you're right. I mean, like there's just emotion just gets so involved, and it's in like almost like you said, at some point you're just like screw it, man, it's not worth it because I'm gonna go certifiably insane.
Yeah, so I think the key with family business is there can't be any gray area. Like if you give people roles, you gotta let them, run with it, and but there's got to be clear expectations as well.
Very
I
well
think,
said.
I think if you're the owner and you've got family members, if you just do whatever you want, I mean, that just sets a poor standard for everybody else, right?
Well, then
I
no one knows whether they're succeeding or failing.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there should be for every role in any business, not just family. There should be expectations. There should be KPIs. It's like what are the goals in that role? What are you doing? How are you going to get there? I mean, all that needs to be ironed out and clear and transparent. Because if not, it just muddies the water, and you know what, that trickles down through like the whole organization, right?
Mhm.
Like that's what happened with my family business. Some of these managers who had stuck around under my father for all these years, like over time, they just got so complacent that they just like didn't give a shit. And
Mhm.
basically, then I come in right as a young kid, and I'm questioning, well, what the hell is this guy doing, and why are we
Mhm.
paying him over? Why are we even paying him? Why does he even have a job? Because I don't know. I don't know what the hell he's doing, but he isn't providing value. But then, if you look at that guy's argument, he could say, well, your father isn't giving me direction, which, was true.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I think important for any business, right, to have those clear lines
Not to
drawn.
go down some rabbit hole, but, John, when I started in the business, there was no org chart for 110 people.
Yeah.
Like, what do you do? I don't know. Like, so before we wrap up, what do you tell the listeners what you're doing now to help people, kind of in the situations that we both been in?
Yeah. So, I actually moved and got my new careers. I'm working in M&A with a digital brokerage. So our focus is software as a service businesses. We also work with e-commerce, Amazon stores, really any online business. And, I've actually taken, my approach to this is constantly evolving because I've only been doing it now about 5 months. But for me, I'm trying just to become this, ultimate resource for business owners. Even though I make the money on the exit with the M&A, I'm meeting people at all stages of business, startups, growth stage. Maybe they're struggling, and for me, it's I want to be a connector, right? I want to help you find the right resource to get you out of the funk you're in or get you to the next stage. So that's where I've really been focused on building my network, meeting people like yourself, and other people that can help with the exit and growth, and people that can help with the startup phase, or if you need an outsourced sales and marketing team, or I met this girl who does customer journey optimization, which is a great thing. So,
That's fun.
so that's where I'm
What's
kind
the
of
best way for
headed.
the listeners to get in touch with you?
Yeah, certainly. You can hit me up on LinkedIn. My URL is LinkedIn/in/slash SaaS business broker. You can email me at john.garutti@digitalacquisitions.co. And I'm happy to chat. And really, anybody that's in the online space, if you got a business, let's talk now, because I certainly can give you some insight on what your a real valuation is. This is another thing that's been driving me nuts. So many people are out of touch of what their company is worth today. And so I think I've been kind of doing this new thing now where it's like, let's reverse engineer your exit, right? Let's
Mm-hmm.
look at what your valuation is today. Let's look at what you want to leave the business with, right? You want to leave the business with $1 million in your pocket, all right? Let's reverse engineer that, let's consider all the fees, the taxes, where your business needs to be from a valuation standpoint, and figure that out. And then this is, probably a few years out, but then, okay, what can we fill in between that time to help you get there to that number where your business needs to be?
Speaking my language, brother.
Exactly. I'm happy to put together at least an overview of what a plan should be to get you that exit 3 to 5 years down the road, and then they can connect with somebody like you to actually implement it, right?
I love it. John, thanks so much for coming on the show and sharing your story, man. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, I had a very fun time. Appreciate you reaching out to me, and let's keep the conversation rolling.